The stars had never looked so close as they did from the bridge of the Endeavor. Captain Marcus Reed watched the massive alien ship drift toward them through the void, its crystalline hull catching starlight and throwing it back in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship was easily 10 times the size of their vessel, yet it moved with the grace of a dancing feather. Dr. Lisa Torres pressed her face against the observation window, her breath fogging the reinforced glass. She had studied xenobiology for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. First contact with an alien species that actually wanted to meet them. The communications officer turned from his station with wide eyes. "Captain, they're requesting permission to board. They say they come in peace and want to welcome us to something called the Galactic Concord." Reed felt his heart hammer against his ribs. 3 months ago, humanity had detected the first signs of intelligent alien life. Radio signals from a distant star system had contained mathematical sequences too complex to be natural. The Endeavor had been hastily prepared and launched on what everyone assumed would be a reconnaissance mission. No one expected the aliens to find them first. The airlock hissed open 20 minutes later, and the first Valdori stepped aboard. Reed had to crane his neck upward to look at the creature's face. 12 feet tall and covered in what looked like living crystal, the alien moved with careful precision. Its skin shifted from deep blue to soft green as it looked around the human ship. "I am Thane," the creature said, its voice resonating like distant thunder. "I speak for the Valdori people. We have waited long to meet your kind." Reed extended his hand, a gesture that seemed foolishly small. "Captain Marcus Reed of Earth, this is Dr. Lisa Torres, our science officer." Thane looked down at the offered hand with what might have been amusement. The crystal patterns on its face brightened to warm amber. "Your customs are different from ours, but the intent is clear." The alien reached out with a massive hand and gently touched Reed's palm. The contact sent a wave of calm through the captain's body. As if all his fears had suddenly become manageable, Dr. Torres stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her nervousness. "Your skin, it changes color. Is that how your people communicate?" "In part," Thane replied. "We feel the emotions of others and respond accordingly. Your species radiates something unique, something we have not encountered in 3,000 years of galactic travel." Over the following hours, Thane explained the Galactic Concord to the assembled human crew. 237 different species belonged to the Alliance, all working together to maintain peace across the galaxy. The Valdori had been the mediators for millennia, using their natural empathic abilities to prevent conflicts before they could start. "But why do you want us to join?" Reed asked. "Humanity has a history of violence. We fight wars, we conquer, we destroy. That doesn't sound like something a peaceful alliance would want." Thane's crystals pulsed with that warm amber light again. "Perhaps that is exactly why we need you." Dr. Torres spent days aboard the Valdori ship, studying their technology and culture. The aliens lived in harmony with their environment on a world called Serenitas. Floating cities drifted through clouds of glowing spores that enhanced their psychic abilities. They had eliminated war, poverty, and suffering from their society centuries ago. The Valdori Council was a sight to behold. Dozens of the crystal beings sat in a vast chamber aboard their ship, their combined presence radiating peace so strongly that Torres felt drowsy just being near them. Elder Thane stood at the center, his ancient form glowing with silver light. "The human species shows promise," Thane announced to the assembly. "They possess the fire of defiance that our ancestors once carried." Another Valdori, younger and smaller than Thane, raised its hand. "But they are violent. Their history is written in blood. How can we sponsor such a species for membership?" "Violence in service of justice is not the same as violence for its own sake," Thane replied. "These humans fight to protect the weak, to defend their homes, to preserve what they value. They have not forgotten something we lost long ago." Torres listened to the debate with fascination. The Valdori spoke of humanity as if they were missing something important, something that humans still possessed. When she asked Thane about it later, the elder's response was cryptic. Your people still remember how to stand when standing seems impossible. You fight when fighting seems hopeless. You sacrifice when sacrifice achieves nothing but the knowledge that you tried. This galaxy has been peaceful for so long that it has forgotten how to be strong. The vote to sponsor humanity's membership in the Galactic Concord was not unanimous, but it passed. Other species raised concerns about human aggression, their tendency toward tribal thinking, their short lifespans that led to impulsive decisions. The Valdori argued for them anyway, as the Endeavor prepared to return to Earth with news that would change human civilization forever. Torres made one final observation. During her time aboard the Valdori ship, she had noticed that their crystalline skin glowed brighter when humans were present. The amber light that appeared when they looked at humans was not something she had seen them display with other species. "What does the amber light mean?" she asked Thane as they said their farewells. The ancient Valdori was quiet for a long moment. "Hope," he finally said. "It means hope." Captain Reed filed his report with Earth Command 3 weeks later. Humanity would join the Galactic Concord as its newest member. They would share their technology, their knowledge, their culture with hundreds of alien species. They would learn to live in peace with beings they had never imagined could exist. But as Reed looked out at the stars from his quarters, he could not shake the feeling that the Valdori were not telling them everything. There had been something in Elder Thane's manner, something in the way the other council members had looked at humans, that suggested they were waiting for something. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders beyond human imagination, but Reed suspected that humanity's greatest test was yet to come, and that the Valdori's decision to sponsor them had less to do with peace and more to do with a war that had not yet begun. The Endeavor continued its journey home, carrying news that would change everything, while behind them the Valdori ships began to move with purpose toward the galactic core. 3 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Concord, and Commander David Park could feel something changing in the galaxy. He stood on the bridge of the human cruiser Defiance, watching long-range scanners track the movement of unknown ships near the Outer Rim territories. The Galactic Concord had welcomed humanity with open arms. Just as Elder Thane had promised, human engineers worked alongside alien scientists on dozens of worlds. Human diplomats learned the complex art of interspecies negotiation. Human children attended schools where their classmates might be energy beings, hive-minded insects, or crystalline giants, but not everyone in the galaxy was happy about the peace that had lasted for 3 millennia. "Sir, we're receiving a distress signal from the Arborian colony on Greenhold," reported Lieutenant Walsh from the communications station. "They say they're under attack." Park's jaw tightened. The Arborians were one of the gentlest species in the Concord, tree-like beings who communicated through chemical sense and spent their lives tending vast forest cities. The idea of anyone attacking them seemed impossible. "Set course for Greenhold, maximum speed," Park ordered. "And send word to the Valdori fleet. They need to know about this." The journey to Greenhold took 18 hours, but they were already too late. Park watched in horror as his ship approached the burning remains of what had once been a thriving world. The great tree cities were nothing but ash and smoke. Massive alien warships circled the planet. Like predators around a kill, the attacking vessels were unlike anything in the Concord database. Black holes covered in spikes and weapon ports, engines that burned red like angry stars, designs that spoke of a culture built around warfare. When the lead ship hailed them, the face that appeared on the screen made Park's blood run cold. War Marshal Gorvik of the Krex Empire stared at him with reptilian eyes that showed no trace of mercy. Scales covered his elongated skull, and when he spoke, rows of sharp teeth flashed in the dim light of his bridge. "You must be the humans we have heard so much about," Gorvik hissed. "The violent species that the Valdori claimed to have tamed. How disappointing. You arrived too late to save these tree creatures. By what right do you attack a peaceful world?" Park demanded, his hands clenching into fists. Gorvik's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "By the right of strength. The Concord has made this galaxy weak with their talk of peace and understanding. The hegemony offers something better. Order through power, unity through conquest. The transmission cut off, and the Krek ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a dead world and millions of enslaved Arborians. Park ordered his crew to search for survivors, but there were precious few. The Kreks had been thorough in their destruction. Dr. Torres arrived on the next ship, now wearing the insignia of the Concord Xenological Division. She had spent the last 3 years studying alien cultures and had become something of an expert on galactic politics. When she saw the devastation on Greenhold, her face went pale. "This isn't random," she told Park as they walked through the ruins of an Arborian nursery grove. "The Kreks are testing the Concord's response. They want to see if we'll fight back, and will we?" Park asked. Torres was quiet for a long moment. "The Valdori are calling an emergency session of the Concord Council, but their nature makes it hard for them to choose violence, even in the face of this." The council session was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered on the neutral station of Unity Prime to debate the growing threat of the hegemony. The Kreks had been joined by other aggressive species, forming a coalition that openly rejected the Concord's peaceful philosophy. Elder Thane spoke for the Valdori, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. "We have maintained peace through understanding and compassion for 3,000 years. Violence begets violence. If we respond to the hegemony with force, we become the very thing we sought to prevent." But other voices in the council were not so certain. The logical Kurtani presented detailed analyses showing that the hegemony's expansion would continue unless stopped by force. The energy-based Luminari spoke of their fear that peaceful species would be enslaved or destroyed. Even some of the younger Valdori began to question their traditional approach. Commander Park was given the chance to address the council, representing humanity's perspective. He stood before hundreds of alien beings, feeling the weight of their attention like a physical force. "The Arborians never hurt anyone," he said, his voice steady despite his anger. "They spent their lives growing things, creating beauty, nurturing life. Now they're slaves or corpses because someone decided that peace was weakness. You can debate philosophy while worlds burn, but someone needs to stand up for those who can't fight back." In the audience, Elder Thane's crystalline form pulsed with that familiar amber light. Dr. Torres, watching from the human delegation, noticed that other Valdori were beginning to show the same response. Something about human emotion was affecting them in ways she had never seen before. The council's final vote was to send diplomatic envoys to the hegemony, hoping to negotiate a peaceful solution. But 3 days later, the envoys' ships were found drifting in space, their crews dead and their vessels stripped of anything valuable. Attached to each ship was a message from War Marshal Gorvik claiming that the time for talk was over. More worlds fell in the following weeks. The gentle wisps of the Crystal Nebula, whose songs could heal psychological trauma, were silenced forever. The underwater cities of the Pelagic were drained and turned into weapons factories. Each attack grew bolder, each act of destruction more complete. Park found himself working more closely with the Valdori fleet as reports of hegemony attacks flooded in. He noticed changes in the crystal beings that Dr. Torres confirmed were unprecedented. Their usual calm was being replaced by something else, something their species had not felt in millennia. "They're angry," Torres explained during a briefing on the Valdori ship Serenity. "Not just sad about the attacks, but genuinely angry. Their empathic abilities mean they feel the pain of every victim, and it's awakening something in them." Elder Thane himself showed the changes most clearly. The ancient Valdori's crystal skin now flickered between its traditional blue and flashes of deep red. When he spoke of the hegemony's attacks, his voice carried an edge that made even hardened human soldiers take notice. "Your species brings something to the galaxy that we had forgotten," Thane told Park during one of their planning sessions. "The willingness to feel rage at injustice. We evolved beyond such emotions long ago, but perhaps we evolved too far." The crisis deepened when several Concord member species began defecting to the hegemony. The militant Korthak and the predatory Shadows joined Gorvik's coalition, bringing their fleets and territories with them. Fear was spreading through the galaxy. A species that had known only peace for generations suddenly faced the possibility of conquest or extinction. Park received word that Earth itself was being threatened. Hegemony scouts had been detected at the edge of human space, and intelligence reports suggested that War Marshal Gorvik saw humanity as a particular threat to his plans. The humans' influence on the Valdori had not gone unnoticed, and the Krex leader wanted to eliminate that influence before it could spread further. Standing on the observation deck of his ship, Park watched Valdori vessels moving through space in formations that looked increasingly military. The gentle giants were changing, and he wondered if that change would come in time to save the galaxy from the storm that was building on the horizon. The attack came without warning, as attacks always do. Commander Park was reviewing supply reports when the alarms began screaming throughout the Defiance. Through the viewports, he could see the Hegemony fleet dropping out of hyperspace like a plague of locusts, their black ships blotting out the stars. War Marshal Gorvik had chosen the Valdori homeworld of Serenitas for his next target, and he had brought everything he had. Thousands of warships filled the space around the peaceful planet, their weapons already charging for the bombardment that would follow. "All human ships, this is Park," the commander broadcast on the emergency channel. "Form up on the Valdori fleet and prepare for battle." But as he watched the alien vessels move into position, Park realized something was wrong. The Valdori ships were not powering their weapons. Their crystalline hulls glowed with the soft blue light of peace, not the silver of war preparation. Even now, facing the destruction of their homeworld, they could not bring themselves to fight. Elder Thane's voice came over the communications system, directed to all ships in the system. "Hegemony fleet, you are not welcome here. We ask you to withdraw and seek peaceful resolution to whatever grievances drive you to violence." War Marshal Gorvik's response was a missile barrage that tore through the lead Valdori ship, sending crystal fragments spinning into the void. The gentle giants aboard that vessel died without ever raising a weapon in their own defense. Park felt something snap inside his chest, a fury so pure it burned like ice. "All human ships, weapons free, protect the Valdori civilians." The human fleet was vastly outnumbered, but they attacked anyway. Earth-built destroyers and cruisers dove into the Hegemony formation, their weapons blazing. For every human ship lost, they took 3 enemy vessels with them, but it was not enough. There were simply too many attackers. Dr. Torres was on Serenitas when the bombardment began. She had been studying Valdori culture in their capital city, a floating spire of living crystal that sang with harmonics too beautiful for human ears. Now those same crystals screamed as Hegemony plasma cannons burned through them. The Valdori around her did not run or fight. They gathered in groups, holding hands and trying to project calm into the chaos. Their empathic abilities, so powerful when used for peace, seemed useless against the raw hatred of their attackers. "We have to evacuate," Torres shouted to Elder Thane as explosions rocked the city around them. "Your people are dying." The ancient Valdori stood motionless, his crystal skin flickering between blue and red so rapidly it looked like purple lightning. "We cannot," he said, his voice heavy with centuries of conditioning. "Violence is not our way. We are the peacekeepers. We must find another solution." Around them, Valdori civilians were being gunned down by Hegemony ground troops. The tree-like refugees from Greenhold, who had been given shelter on Serenitas, were burning again. Children of a dozen different species cried out for help that was not coming. Torres grabbed Thane's massive arm, her small human hands barely spanning his crystal wrist. "Sometimes there is no other solution. Sometimes you have to fight or watch everything you love die." Something in her words, or perhaps the emotion behind them, finally broke through millennia of conditioning. Thane's crystal skin flared with silver light so bright it was painful to look at. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Valdori felt the fire of defiance burning in his chest. "No," Thane said, and his voice carried the authority of eons. "No more." The change that swept through the Valdori was visible even from space. Their ships, which had been drifting helplessly under the Hegemony assault, suddenly blazed with silver light. Weapon systems that had been dormant for millennia came online. Crystal technology that had been designed for healing and communication adapted itself for war, but it was too late for many. Half the Valdori fleet was already destroyed, and Serenitas was burning. The great floating cities crashed into the planet's surface as their crystal cores were shattered by enemy fire. Millions of peaceful beings died in minutes, their only crime being their refusal to fight. The surviving Valdori ships fought with a fury that shocked both their allies and enemies. Their crystalline weapons turned hegemony shields against their own ships. Their psychic coordination allowed perfect tactical strikes across vast distances. War Marshal Gorvik had awakened something terrible in his quest for dominance. Commander Park found himself fighting alongside Valdori vessels for the first time, and the experience was unlike anything he had imagined. The crystal beings could sense his intentions before he spoke them, coordinating their attacks with impossible precision. Human aggression combined with Valdori wisdom created a fighting force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The battle for Serenitas lasted 3 days and ended with a hegemony retreat. But the cost had been devastating. The most peaceful species in the galaxy had been forced to choose between their principles and their survival, and they had chosen to survive. In the aftermath, Elder Thane called an emergency session of the Valdori Council. The great chamber aboard their flagship was different now, its walls glowing with silver instead of blue. The ancient beings who had governed through compassion for millennia now faced a choice that would define their species' future. "We have become what we swore never to become," said one of the younger Valdori, her crystal form dim with grief. "We have chosen violence over peace. We have chosen survival over extinction," Thane replied. "And perhaps we have remembered something. Our ancestors knew that we had forgotten." Dr. Torres stood before the council, the only human permitted to witness their deliberation. Her studies of Valdori history had revealed something that even they had not fully understood about their own past. "Your ancestors were not pacifists," she told them. "They were warriors who chose peace after winning a war that nearly destroyed the galaxy. The fire of defiance is not alien to your species. It is part of your genetic memory, suppressed by millennia of conditioning." She showed them records she had found in their own archives, ancient texts that spoke of a time when the Valdori had fought against dark forces that threatened all life. They had been the galaxy's protectors once before they became its peacekeepers. "The hegemony is not offering an alternative philosophy," Torres continued. "They are offering slavery or death to anyone who will not submit. Your choice is not between peace and war. Your choice is between resistance and extinction." The debate that followed lasted for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The younger Valdori, especially those who had worked closely with humans, had already felt the awakening of their ancestral courage. The older ones, like Thane, remembered stories their grandparents had told about the ancient wars. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Valdori chose war. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The most peaceful species in known space had taken up arms against the hegemony. Other Concord members who had been wavering in their allegiance suddenly found their courage. If the Valdori could fight, then anyone could. War Marshal Gorvik's response was swift and brutal. He declared that the Concord had shown its true nature and that all peaceful species were now enemies of the hegemony. The galaxy polarized into 2 camps, and the war that had been building for months finally began in earnest. Commander Park received new orders from Earth Command to coordinate human forces with the Valdori fleet. As he prepared his ships for the battles to come, he reflected on the strange turn of events that had brought them to this point. Humanity had joined the Galactic Concord to learn peace from the wisest species in the galaxy. Instead, they had taught the Valdori how to fight. The irony was not lost on him, but neither was the necessity. Sometimes peace could only be preserved through war, and sometimes the most loving thing you could do was to stand and fight for those who could not fight for themselves. The transformation of the Valdori shocked every species in the galaxy, but none more than War Marshal Gorvik himself. The reptilian commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching tactical displays that showed impossible results. The gentle crystal beings who had refused to fight for 3,000 years were now destroying his fleets with ruthless efficiency. How is this possible? Gorvik hissed to his tactical officer, a scarred veteran of a dozen conquered worlds. They are pacifists. They do not even know how to hold weapons. The officer's response was cut off by another explosion as Valdori crystal cannons tore through their escort ships. The peaceful aliens had somehow turned their healing technology into instruments of war, weapons that had been designed to mend. Broken bones now shattered enemy hulls. Communication arrays that had carried messages of peace now coordinated devastating attacks. Across multiple star systems, Commander Park led the joint human-Valdori fleet into battle after battle, and each victory felt like a miracle. The humans provided tactical aggression and unpredictable strategies, while the Valdori offered strategic wisdom and perfect coordination. Together, they formed a fighting force that neither species could have achieved alone. Elder Thane had taken the unprecedented step of joining the front lines personally. The ancient Valdori's massive crystal form moved through the corridors of human ships with surprising grace, his presence somehow making every decision clearer and every action more precise. When Park asked him why he had abandoned the safety of command positions, Thane's answer was simple. For 3 millennia, I have sent others to make peace while I remain safe. If I am to ask my people to make war, I must share their danger. The first major victory came at the Battle of Twin Stars, where a hegemony force attempting to enslave the water world of Aquatica found itself facing the full fury of awakened Valdori. The crystal beings' psychic abilities, focused on warfare instead of peace, allowed them to predict enemy movements and coordinate attacks with impossible precision. Dr. Torres watched the battle from the bridge of a Valdori cruiser, documenting the changes in her former subjects of study. The peaceful giants had become something new, their crystal skin now shifting between silver and blue depending on whether they were fighting or healing. Their empathic abilities, instead of sensing and soothing aggression, now detected weakness and exploited it. You have given us back ourselves, Thane told her as they watched hegemony ships flee the system. We had forgotten that our ancestors were warriors before they were peacekeepers. We were not always gentle. The victory at Twin Stars inspired other Concord species to find their own courage. The logical Kurtani began developing new tactical algorithms specifically designed for warfare. The hive-minded Raish coordinated their millions of individuals into perfect military formations. The energy-based Luminari learned to weaponize their natural abilities, turning themselves into living weapons that could disable entire enemy ships. Even the surviving Arborians, freed from hegemony slave camps, joined the fight. The tree-like beings could not hold conventional weapons, but they could grow them. Entire forests sprang up on liberated worlds, their root systems forming natural fortifications and their branches launching seed pods filled with crystalline explosives. War Marshal Gorvik found his empire under attack from multiple directions as the Concord species discovered strengths they had never known they possessed. The hegemony had been built to fight traditional military forces, not to face an alliance where every member contributed unique abilities to the war effort. The human-Valdori partnership became the spearhead of the Concord's offensive operations. Park's aggressive tactics combined with Thane's strategic insights proved devastatingly effective. They liberated system after system, freeing enslaved populations and destroying hegemony infrastructure, but the war was taking its toll on both species. Human ships were tough but not indestructible, and every battle cost lives that could not be replaced. The Valdori were discovering that their crystal bodies, while resilient, could be shattered by enemy weapons. For beings who had lived for centuries in peace, each death was a tragedy that resonated through their empathic connections. The psychological cost was perhaps even greater. The Valdori had spent millennia conditioning themselves toward perfect pacifism, and the return of their warrior nature was traumatic. Some of the younger crystal beings adapted quickly, embracing their newfound aggression with frightening enthusiasm. Others struggled with the contradiction between their nature and their actions, their crystal forms flickering constantly between peaceful blue and warrior silver. Dr. Torres found herself serving as both scientist and counselor to the Valdori fleet. Her understanding of both human and Valdori psychology made her uniquely qualified to help the crystal beings adjust to their new reality. "We are becoming what we fought so hard not to be," one young Valdori confided to her after a particularly brutal battle. "How long before we are no different from the hegemony?" "The difference is why you fight," Torres replied. "The hegemony fights for power and conquest. You fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That distinction matters more than you know." The Alliance faced its greatest test at the siege of Fortress Prime, the hegemony's most heavily defended system. Gorvik had retreated there, with the core of his fleet turning the entire system into a massive weapons platform. The space around the central world bristled with defense stations, minefields, and automated weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Park and Thane spent weeks planning the assault, knowing that failure would likely mean the end of the Concords. Offensive capability. They had one advantage that Gorvik could not have anticipated: the Valdori's ability to coordinate attacks. Across multiple dimensions of space and time, the battle began with a coordinated strike by 100 different species, each contributing their unique abilities to the assault. Human ships provided the initial breakthrough, their pilots' aggressive instincts allowing them to find gaps in the seemingly impenetrable defenses. Valdori vessels followed, their crystal weapons turning the hegemony's own defensive systems against each other. The Cartani calculated optimal attack vectors in real time, adjusting their strategies faster than any computer. The Reich swarmed through the defensive perimeter like a living tide, their individual units expendable but their collective intelligence unstoppable. The Luminari turned themselves into guided weapons, sacrificing their physical forms to disable critical systems. Elder Thane led a boarding party onto one of the defensive stations, his massive crystal form moving through enemy corridors with deadly purpose. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Valdori killed with his own hands, crushing hegemony soldiers who had enslaved innocent worlds. The ancient being felt no joy in the violence, but neither did he feel shame. Sometimes he had learned killing was the most compassionate act possible. The siege lasted 6 days and ended with the complete destruction of the hegemony's defensive network. War Marshal Gorvik's fleet was scattered, his empire collapsing as liberated worlds rose up against their oppressors. But the reptilian commander himself escaped, fleeing toward the Krex homeworld with the remnants of his forces in the aftermath. A victory, Park and Thane stood together on the observation deck of a Valdori ship, watching the lights of freed worlds twinkling in the distance. The galaxy was free, but the cost had been enormous. Thousands of ships from dozens of species lay broken in the void, their crews having paid the ultimate price for peace. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Park asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Thane's crystal form pulsed with a mixture of silver and blue, war and peace existing in the same moment. "We did what was necessary," he replied. "Our ancestors would understand. Peace without the strength to defend it is not peace at all. It is merely the pause between conquests." The war was not over yet. Gorvik still lived, and the Krex homeworld remained unconquered. But for the first time since the conflict began, Park felt hope. The galaxy had remembered how to fight for its freedom, and the alliance between the most peaceful and most warlike species had shown that any tyranny could be overcome if good beings were willing to stand together against it. The final battle for the galaxy began in the red light of the Krex home system. War Marshal Gorvik had retreated to his species' ancient stronghold, a world of volcanic mountains and poisonous seas where his ancestors had learned the art of conquest. Around the planet, the last ships of the hegemony waited in defensive formations, their crews knowing that defeat here meant the end of their empire. Commander Park led the combined Concord fleet toward the enemy position, but his heart was heavy with the knowledge of what this battle would cost. The hegemony forces were desperate now, and desperate enemies fought harder than any others. Many of the ships around him would not survive the day, and many of his friends would die before the galaxy could finally know peace. Elder Thane stood beside him on the bridge of the human flagship, the ancient Valdori's crystal form reflecting the red light of the Krek sun. In the months since the war began, Thane had changed in ways that went beyond his newfound ability to fight. The gentle wisdom that had made him a perfect peacekeeper now served him as a warrior, allowing him to see not just how to win battles, but how to end wars. "He will not surrender," Thane said, referring to War Marshal Gorvik. "His species sees defeat as a fate worse than death. He would rather destroy his own world than admit failure." Park nodded grimly. Intelligence reports had confirmed their worst fears. Gorvik had armed his homeworld with weapons capable of cracking the planet's core, turning the entire world into a massive bomb. If the Concord forces pressed their attack too hard, the mad reptilian commander would trigger an explosion that would kill everyone in the system, allies and enemies alike. "Then we stop him before he gets the chance," Park said. "Get me a direct line to all ship commanders." The assault began with a coordinated strike by every species in the Concord fleet. Human destroyers led the charge, their aggressive pilots finding gaps in the enemy formation. Valdori cruisers followed, their crystal weapons turning hegemony shields into useless decorations. The Kotani provided tactical analysis in real time while the Raish swarmed through the defensive perimeter in their millions, but Gorvik had prepared for this moment. His ships fought with the fury of the doomed, selling their lives dearly for every meter of space. Plasma cannons tore through Concord vessels while missile swarms darkened the void between the fleets. The space around the Krek's homeworld became a graveyard of burning metal and shattered crystal. Dr. Torres was aboard a Valdori medical vessel, treating wounded from both sides of the conflict. The empathic abilities of her crystal hosts meant that they could feel the pain of every injured being, regardless of species or allegiance. Even in war, the Valdori could not abandon their compassion. "The human ship Endeavor is breaking up," reported one of the Valdori medics, his crystal form flickering with shared agony. Captain Reed's vessel took a direct hit to the engine core. Torres felt her heart stop. Marcus Reed had been humanity's first contact with the Valdori, the man who had started this unlikely alliance. Now he was dying in the vacuum of space. His ship torn apart by enemy fire, but Reed's sacrifice was not in vain. His kamikaze run into the hegemony formation had opened a gap in their defenses, allowing Concord boarding parties to reach the planet's surface. Park led the assault personally, accompanied by Elder Thane and a mixed force of human marines and Valdori warriors. The surface of the Krek's homeworld was a nightmare of industrial pollution and military installations. Automated defenses tracked their landing craft with merciless precision, filling the poisonous air with explosions and laser fire. But the combined forces pressed forward, their different abilities complementing each other perfectly. Thane's psychic powers allowed him to sense enemy positions through solid rock, while Park's tactical instincts found the weak points in seemingly impregnable fortifications. Human flexibility combined with Valdori strength proved unstoppable as they fought their way toward Gorvik's command bunker. The final confrontation took place deep underground in a chamber filled with the machinery that could destroy the planet. War Marshal Gorvik waited for them there, his reptilian form encased in powered armor that made him look more like a machine than a living being. "You have won," Gorvik admitted as Park and Thane entered the chamber with their remaining troops. "But I will not give you the satisfaction of my surrender. This world dies with me and takes all of you with it." The Krek's commander's hand moved toward the activation controls for the planet-killer weapon, but Thane was faster. The ancient Valdori's psychic abilities reached out and seized Gorvik's mind, forcing the reptilian warrior to experience something he had never felt before. Empathy. In an instant, Gorvik felt the pain of every world he had conquered, every innocent he had enslaved, every life he had destroyed in his quest for power. The weight of 1,000,000 deaths crashed down on his consciousness, shattering his will to fight. He collapsed to his knees, his weapon forgotten, as tears of true remorse streamed down his scaled face. "I understand now," Gorvik whispered, his voice broken by the magnitude of his crimes. What have I done? What have I become? The war was over, but victory felt hollow as the cost became clear. Entire fleets had been destroyed in the final battle. Thousands of Valdori lay dead, their crystal forms dark and cracked. Human ships drifted powerless in the void, their crews lost to the vacuum of space. Captain Reed's funeral was held on the restored world of Serenitas, with representatives from every species in the Concord attending to honor the man who had made their alliance possible. His body lay in state beneath the floating crystal spires, while Valdori singers filled the air with harmonies that seemed to make the very atoms weep. Dr. Torres spoke at the service, her words carrying across the galaxy through quantum communication networks. Marcus Reed believed that different species could work together despite their differences. He died defending that belief, and his sacrifice made the galaxy a freer place. Elder Thane also spoke, his ancient voice carrying the weight of ages. The humans taught us something we had forgotten. They reminded us that peace without the courage to defend it is not peace at all. They showed us that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to heal from the wounds of war. The hegemony was dissolved, its member species offered amnesty in exchange for reparations to their victims. War Marshal Gorvik, broken by his forced empathy, spent his remaining years working to rebuild the worlds he had destroyed. The Valdori underwent, perhaps, the greatest change of all. Their crystal skin had evolved during the war, now capable of shifting between the blue of peace and the silver of justified war as circumstances demanded. They had learned to balance their natural compassion with the strength to protect what they valued. A new memorial was built on Serenitas, a structure of human metal and Valdori crystal that honored all those who had died in the war. The names of every fallen warrior were carved into its surface, regardless of species or allegiance. Even former hegemony soldiers who had died fighting for their beliefs were remembered there. Commander Park, now Admiral Park, stood before the memorial, with Elder Thane as the dedication ceremony concluded. The ancient Valdori had aged visibly during the war, his crystal form bearing scars that would never fully heal. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Park asked, echoing the question he had posed during the siege of Fortress Prime. Thane was quiet for a long moment, his crystal skin shifting between silver and blue like thoughts made visible. "We did what was necessary," he finally replied. "And perhaps we learned something important in the process. Peace and war are not opposites. They are two faces of the same coin. Sometimes you need war to preserve peace, and sometimes you need peace to end war." The galaxy had indeed learned something important. The galactic concord emerged from the conflict stronger than before, its member species united by shared sacrifice and mutual respect. New protocols were established ensuring that the concord would never again be helpless in the face of aggression. Dr. Torres, now the director of the Concord's Interspecies Relations Department, published her final report on the war and its aftermath. The document became required reading for diplomats throughout the galaxy, a reminder of what could happen when peaceful beings forgot how to be strong. The most peaceful aliens in the galaxy had stood beside humanity because they recognized a fundamental truth, that freedom was not free, that peace was not passive, and that sometimes the greatest act of love was to take up arms in defense of those who could not defend themselves. The war was over, but its lessons would be remembered for generations to come. In teaching the Valdori to fight, humanity had helped them become complete, capable of both perfect peace and righteous war as circumstances demanded. And in learning from the Valdori's wisdom, humanity had discovered that true strength came not from the ability to make war, but from the wisdom to know when war was necessary and when it was not. The galaxy was free, and it would remain free because its guardians had learned to balance the sword and the olive branch ready to offer, either as the situation required.